Up until the 18th century, the Lake District had remained a virtual secret to the rest of Britain. This is England's scenic wonderland, a place of rugged mountains, often divided by magnificent ravines, cascading waterfalls, green valleys, and, above all, lakes. Lakes which are fed by many numbers of mountain streams, winding their way through flower-clad gorges from which tumbling waterfalls plunge and sparkle. The landscape, which has changed little since it inspired poets like Wordsworth and painters like Turner, is now protected by the largest national park in the country. It was William Wordsworth who first gave birth to the idea of the Lake District as a national park, although this did not become a reality in England until 1949, with the passing of the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act. It was the arrival of the railways that marked the first real beginning of the tourist age, when the line from London to Carlisle was opened in 1846. Since then, the numbers of visitors have gradually increased, until now thousands returned year after year to walk the fells, climb the crags and sail on the lakes, or simply to enjoy strolling through the valleys. Kirkby Lonsdale is on high ground overlooking a bend in the River Lune. The dark grey stone buildings spread out from the market square in narrow alleys and cobbled courtyards, with names like Salt Pie Lane and Jingling Lane. According to local tradition, Jingling Lane acquired its name because it jingles if someone treads heavily along it. This may be due to an echoing effect from an old tunnel said to exist beneath the surface. The local markets are held on Thursdays. There are several inns, including the 17th century Sun Hotel, with its 3 pillars at the front, and then there is the Royal Hotel, which is named after William IV's widow, Queen Adelaide. St. Mary's Churchyard has a very unusual feature, an 8-sided pavilion, which was probably built in the 18th century to provide a sheltered point from which to enjoy the magnificent views of the Lune Valley. Ruskin, a good judge of landscapes, described the views as one of the loveliest scenes in England. Another admirer of beautiful scenery was J.M.W. Turner. A wall plaque marks where Turner worked. The Norman church, full of variety and interest, contains richly carved Norman doorways. Southeast of the town are 2 bridges which span the River Lune. An ancient one called Devil's Bridge, with 3 graceful arches, is supposedly to have been built by Satan. The new one was definitely built by mortal man in 1932. It is said that when Satan put up the bridge, he claimed the first living thing to cross it. Kendal, known as the Old Grey Town because of its many fine old houses and other buildings in grey limestone, lies at the foot of 2 fells and on the banks of the River Kent, south of the Lake District. It is the river which gives the place its name, Kendal being a corruption of Kent Dale. Across the narrow valley can be seen Kendal Fell. This is where the grey limestone which was used to build the town came from, and from where there were grazing rights. Renowned for some of the largest sheep runs in Europe during the Middle Ages, it is hardly surprising that the prosperity of Kendal was built on wool. "Wool is my bread" is the motto of the town, and this was certainly true as carpeting became an important part of Kendal's trade. Another industry connected with wool was that of knitting, and Kendal was a centre for hand-knitted stockings. The knitting was often done by young girls. Equally famous is the unique toffee called Kendal Mint Cake, which is still manufactured here today. At the end of Kirkland, is Holy Trinity Church, one of the largest churches in England. It was built in the 13th century and restored in the 19th. Inside the church are the chapels of the local families from Tudor times and some particularly good memorials and brasses. Over the centuries of its existence, Holy Trinity has seen more than its fair share of misfortunes. During the 17th century, the communion plate was stolen and never recovered. But this was nothing compared to the events of 1189, when the Scots invaded the church and massacred all the citizens who had taken refuge there. The best known tale, however, is the legend of Robin the Devil, alias the Royalist Sir Robert Philipson. After being attacked at his home, Belle Isle, by Colonel Briggs, the Roundhead magistrate, the devil led a band of armed men into the town and rode into Kendal Church during morning service in search of his enemy. Briggs was not there, and in the confusion, Robin lost his sword and helmet. The sword and helmet can be seen on the north wall of the church. The stained glass windows in the church are very fine examples indeed. However, only 2 small pictures are original and probably date back to the 13th century. Between the church and recreation ground is Abbot Hall. Built in 1759 as a town residence for Colonel George Wilson, and are now converted into a museum and art gallery. The former stables of the house have become the Museum of Lakeland Life and Industry, showing displays of bygone times in Lakeland. Do give the Brewery Arts Centre a visit. There is bound to be an event of some type taking place during your visit to Kendal. Within the centre are exhibitions, a theatre and a cinema, which are all constantly in use. A good vantage point to view the town and surrounding area is from the castle. This 14th century ruined castle was the reputed birthplace of Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's 6th and last wife. The stone wall is surrounded by a deep moat, dry and grassy. Still standing are the 3 towers of 13th century origin, and still in a reasonable state of preservation. As the castle is set on such a distinctive hillock, the view from it makes up for the short but somewhat steep climb up, and is well worthwhile. In April 1847, the railway from Kendal to Windermere was opened. From that time on, the tiny farming hamlet grew up around the station and what is now the Windermere Hotel, spreading gradually down the hill towards the older lakeside village of Bowness, and now the 2 places are linked. Today, the Lake District's busiest tourist centre caters for the holiday trade, with many shops, guest houses, hotels and holiday flats spread over the surrounding countryside. But the most focal point in this mountainous scenery is the lake itself. More than 10 miles long, it is England's largest lake. Many water speed records have been attempted on this lake. In 1930, Sir Henry Seagrave was killed here whilst attempting to break a world record. The lake is rich in fish life, perch, pike, and salmon-like char. There are excellent facilities for boating and water sports, with regular pleasure steamer trips setting sail for a cruise around the lake. About half a mile along the lake shore is the Windermere Steamboat Museum. The museum was opened in 1977 by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales as part of the Queen's Silver Jubilee celebrations. In 1982, an extension to the museum, which included a wet dock space and a lecture theatre, was opened by the Duke of Westminster. Amongst this unique and historical collection of Victorian and Edwardian steam launches on view is Dolly, circa 1850. It is the oldest mechanically powered boat in the world and is listed in the Guinness Book of Records. The classic Windermere steamer Swallow was built to replace an electric launch. These were popular about this time, but their hulls were invariably damaged by battery acid spilling into the bilges. The Bible story of the prophet Elijah being fed by ravens inspired the directors of the Furness Railway Company to name their cargo boat Raven, as they saw the analogy of raven feeding the scattered and remote lakeside settlements. Before she was built, the only means of transport around the lake was by horse and cart over very poor roads. Another interesting exhibit on display is Beatrix Potter's rowing boat. It was recovered in 1976 from Moss Eccles Tarn and presented to the museum. For everyone who does not own a boat, this excellent museum offers a unique opportunity to study and learn about boats and launches close up. The museum is open from Easter to October. Bo'ness, with its lively waterfront, is an excellent venue for the water sports enthusiast. People attracted to water sports, and with the recent developments along the shore between Bo'ness and the ferry, show just how popular water sports have become. At Bo'ness, some fine views can be seen along the lake shore, along with spectacular scenery from Brant Fell. For a more novel way to see the sights, take the train. Between Windermere Town and Ambleside, on the A591 road, is Lowood Water Sports and Activity Centre. This unique centre offers excellent facilities for those wanting to participate in water sports events. Just at 2.5 miles north of the A591 and 592 junction at Windermere is Brockholm. Established in 1969 as the first National Park Visitor Centre, Brockholm provides a range of facilities and events with audio-visual presentations and lectures given regularly. Interpretative displays and exhibitions illustrate all aspects of the Lake District, providing opportunities for youth and school groups to learn about the area through a diverse range of publications and activities. The mansion is set in 30 acres of beautiful, well-kept grounds and gardens, which stretch down to the shores of Windermere. You may like to sail on the lake from the jetty here, or explore the lakeside walks and grounds. There are picnic places, shops, a cafeteria, and special activities for the children. The Adventure Playground provides an exhilarating experience for the children amidst high tower slides and aerial runways. Situated just off the main A592 road is the mile-long village of Trout Beck. The series of 17th and 18th century farms and cottages are scattered along a narrow lane bordered by dry stone walls. At its southern end, Town End, is a most interesting and important house. Built around 1623, this lovely old house belonged to the Brown family for nearly 300 years. It is now owned by the National Trust. Much of the original oak furniture and woodwork, as well as books and papers collected by the family at that time, are on display. Towards the end of the village, farms and cottages group tightly around the Mortal Man, a 17th century inn, and the delightful Clock Cottage. Trout Beck's 18th century church and former school are down in the valley. Moving on from Trout Beck and along the A592 is Kirkstone Pass, the highest pass in the region, reaching 1,489 feet at its summit near the Kirkstone Pass Inn. The pass has been named after a huge boulder shaped like a small church tower. If you start your journey from Ambleside, a minor road stretch named the Struggle joins the road from Windermere at the inn and is then only moderately steep and sufficiently wide for cars to pass. On the descent to Patterdale, rugged fells sweep down to the small lake of Brothers Water. To the west is Dove Crag, a rock face 2,603 feet up in the hills. Half a mile south of the southwest tip of Ullswater, the attractive if somewhat scattered village of Patterdale is so spread about that it seems to have no real identity. The church is dedicated to St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, who is said to have preached and baptized converts here. 1 mile north of the town, by the roadside, is his holy well. Patterdale village is an excellent base for climbing the 3,118 feet Helvellyn, the third highest peak in the Lake District. It can be tackled by any fully equipped and experienced hiker. The mile-long ridge of Striding Edge has been much improved in recent years and is easy underfoot, but it cannot be emphasized too strongly that Striding Edge is a dangerous place for anyone who is not an experienced fell walker. An easier walk to the summit and avoiding the edge can be made from the west. On a clear day, almost every fell in Lakeland can be seen from the top. Just beyond the head of Ullswater, situated on some flat land at the mouth of a broad dale, is the village of Glenridding. Once an important mining village, the lead vein upon which the Greenside mine was based runs approximately north and south through the eastern flanks of Greenside Fell. It is reputed to have been discovered in the middle of the 17th century and was first worked by shallow diggings near the summit of the fell. The mine has been closed for some years now, the last ore reserves being exhausted in 1961. But the memory lingers on, a faint reminder that the Greenside lead mine was once one of the most prosperous in the country. A youth hostel has been established in part of the building. Ullswater is a 7.5-mile long lake of exceeding beauty, comparable in size to Windermere or Coniston, but lovelier than either. The lake can be said to divide into 3 sections, with the A592 road keeping close to its western shore for most of the way. Where the Era Beck enters the lake, there is a wooded point of high ground. It was near here on the lake shore that Wordsworth, during a spring walk, saw the sights that inspired his best-known lines. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. You can be sure the most famous daffodils in the world still bloom on Ullswater's shores today. One mile southeast of Dockeray, off the A592 as you leave Glenridding, a car park leads you to one of the most romantic spots in the Lake District. Era Point is part of Gowbarrow Park, a National Trust property which includes Era Force and Gowbarrow Fell. A short, easy walk will bring you to the deep, wooded, rocky glen, where Era Force waterfall plunges 70 to 80 feet by 2 stages into a dark, shaded pool. The sound of rushing water echoes around the remote glen, where beds of ferns and hawthorns glisten with droplets of water from the constant mist and spray. 2 bridges span the gorge, one above and one below. Cross the top bridge and follow the beck upstream to another beautiful waterfall called High Force. Legend has it that Era Force was once the scene of a love tragedy. Its heroine, Emma, was in love with a knight called Sir Eglamour. He went off to the wars, and before long, Emma, on hearing reports of the ladies he had befriended, began to doubt his love for her. In despair, she took to sleepwalking beside Era Force, the place where they had first met. One evening, Sir Eglamour came back and found his beloved Emma at the waterfall. He called her name, and as she awakened, she tripped and fell to her death into the cold waters below. The knight dashed to her rescue and pulled her to the bank, where she lived just long enough to recognize that her true love had returned. Behind the Sun Inn is a pond of ancient origin, now derelict, which is all that remains of a pool that gave rise to the name Pooley, the little farming and fishing community that stood along the banks of the river. Pooley being a corruption of Pool by the Hill. Then in the 18th century, a bridge was built across the River Emont, and the village became known as it is today, Pooley Bridge. Beside the bridge, the village is spread out along 2 principal streets, both of which are lined with old stone cottages. Some of these cottages date back to the 18th century. Among them are traces of a blacksmith shop and, just opposite, the stand for a grindstone and wells for cooling the iron. A good view of Ullswater and of the surrounding mountains is obtained from the narrow road which runs along the lake's eastern shore from Pooley Bridge. This road will lead you to the remote hamlet of Martindale. The northern section from Pooley Bridge is bordered with low hills and is much favoured by water sport enthusiasts. Wooded banks and higher hills give the middle section its particular charm, while the third section is sheltered beneath a group of mountains dominated by the Helvellyn Range to the west. reaching to over 3,000 feet. A regular steamer service operates between Pulley Bridge and Glenridding, calling at Howe Town. One of the best ways to explore Ullswater Lake is to take a boat trip aboard the steamers Lady of the Lake and the Raven. The lake is classed as a public highway, and anyone is free to explore its creeks and islands. 4 miles southwest of Pulley Bridge, a narrow winding road travels the lakeside to the isolated parish of Martindale, from where 3 long and lonely dales cut deep into the wild fells. The 2 churches here must be among the loneliest in Britain. St. Peter's was built in 1880, St. Martin's in 1633 and restored in 1833. A simple dale chapel with a plain bellcot, it contains much of the original woodwork. A chapel has been on this site since at least 1221, and it was given the name of St. Martin in 1266. The only form of artificial lighting is from one large candle. The splendid yew tree by the side of the church is said to be over 800 years old. Haweswater is the most isolated of all the lakes. Originally only 2.5 miles long, but a dam completed in 1940 turned the lake into a 4.5-mile long reservoir, supplying Manchester with water and submerging the village of Marsdale. Local legend says that the church bells of Holy Trinity Church, demolished in 1936, can still be heard when the waters are whipped by strong winds. From time to time, the ruins of the church may be seen. At the southern tip of the lake, the awesome crags of Harter Fell are an impressive sight, but even more so when viewed in combination with Haweswater and Smallwater. Nearby, from the Longsleddale Valley, climb up to the top of Gatescarth Pass for a spectacular view over Haweswater. In a series of gigantic steps, the north face of Harter Fell plunges 1,800 feet to the head of the lake. One mile south of Keswick, turn left off the A66 road at Threlkeld, after the B5332, and follow the unclassified road. This leads you to the Bronze Age stone circle known as Castlerigg Circle. It was erected around 1500 BC and is situated on a grassy field surrounded by a panorama of mountains. Now owned by the National Trust, this lonely monument with its atmosphere of mystery remains a tribute to gods or goddesses unknown. The capital of northern Lakeland, Keswick, has a deep-rooted history, for Edward I granted the market charter over 700 years ago. After the Civil War, the town declined for a while before its fortunes revived with the discovery of graphite, first mined from the slopes in Borrowdale and used for making lead pencils. Often known as the Jewel of the Lakeland, Keswick is largely an early Victorian town, with most of its buildings in the attractive greenish-grey slate stone. Overlooking the marketplace is the Moot, or Town Hall. Built in 1813, the bell on the hall's tower is dated 1001. Surrounding the marketplace, there are plenty of good shops, inns and hotels which cater for the many thousands of tourists who visit here each year. For a fortnight each July, a convention is held, and Christians from all over the world meet at one of their venues, the 16th century church of St. Kentigern in Crosthwaite. The Cumberland Pencil Museum has a display of the lead pencils which are made in Keswick. The local supply of graphite has been exhausted, but pencils are still made with imported graphite. The walks around Keswick are superb, with the Derwent Water featuring in most of the views. Derwent Water has long been regarded as one of the most attractive lakes in the district. Even before John Ruskin declared the view from Friars Crag to be one of the finest in Europe, Derwent Water was acclaimed to be the gem of the district. The islands of the lake, which add so much to the picturesque scenery, have their own histories. St. Herbert's Island, opposite Derwent Bay, was the home of the 7th century saint. Lord's Island, just off the shore at Strandshay Bay, is so called because it was the home of the local lord of the manor. But perhaps the most interesting of the islands is Derwent Isle. Its first known name was Hestholme, then became Vickers Island, until during the 18th century it passed into the hands of the eccentric Mr. Pocklington, when it became known as Pocklington's Island. Pocklington built a house on his island, a sham church, a druid's circle, a boathouse, and a fort equipped with a cannon. In addition to a regular round-the-lake launch service, stopping at various points, boats can be hired from the Keswick landing stage. Launching facilities for visitors' boats are available here and at Portinscale. On the way to Wattenslath, just 5 miles south of Keswick, a narrow road leads off the B5289 to a tiny hump-backed bridge. This little bridge is very popular with the visitors and has been painted and photographed avidly throughout its history. For those of you with a head for heights, just beyond the bridge there is a car park, which is the starting point of a short footpath through Ashness Wood, which will bring you to a cliff edge known as Surprise View. Breathtaking panoramic views of Derwent Water and Skiddaw are framed by graceful birches and flat-topped pines. Bowder Stone, situated near Grange, is a well-known landmark. It has been a natural curiosity since the earliest days of tourism, and also the most accessible, hence its popularity. This immense stone is 30 feet high and 60 feet long. It weighs about 2,000 tons, rests on a narrow crest, like the roof of a house reversed, as one writer put it. Nearby the small cottage, now a climbing club hut, was built by the eccentric Mr. Pocklington as a home for an old woman who acted as a guide to the rock. It seems likely to roll over at any moment, but it has been that way for several thousands of years, when an ice glacier dumped it there. Between Derwent and Seathwaite is the 5-mile valley of Borrowdale, popular with every kind of visitor, from the motorist to the rock climber. Until the road was built, probably in the 18th century, the small scattered villages of Borrowdale could only be reached by foot or horseback. There are plenty of splendid walks leading from the steep-sided valley which runs south from Derwentwater to the village of Seathwaite. Seathwaite has long been known as one of the wettest inhabited places in England, the average rainfall being 129 inches per year. One of the finest waterfalls to be seen in Borrowdale is Sour Milk Gill. This sparkling waterfall is just west of Seathwaite. Not far from Sour Milk Gill, on the same fell side, the visitor will notice the dark mounds which are the spoil heaps from the old Plumbago mines. Plumbago is black lead or graphite. If you look carefully and with luck, you might still find small pieces of Plumbago remnants left over from a once prosperous industry. Another path southwards leads you to the 1,600 feet high Stye Head Pass. This route passes the 2,949 feet Great Gable, one of the highest and best known mountains of the area, and it continues to the hamlet of Wasdale Head. The road over Honister Pass, as we know it today, is comparatively recent. It was surfaced in 1934, but traces of the old road can still be seen. Once there was a regular stagecoach service from Keswick to Buttermere, which took this route. It began in the 1860s and continued until the road was surfaced, when it was found that the new tarmac surface did not give sufficient grip for the horses on the steep gradients. Stagecoaches were a common sight in the Lakeland until the 1920s, when most of them were replaced by buses. Paths lead from Buttermere to two of Cumbria's most beautiful lakes, tumbling waterfalls, woodlands rich in wildlife, and green fields scattered with grazing sheep. Much of this can be seen from the tiny parish church of St. James, reached from the hamlet by a short, steep climb overlooking farm buildings and Buttermere Lake. In 1802, the hamlet of Buttermere found national fame with the story of Mary Robinson, the 18-year-old daughter of the landlord of the Fish Hotel, and a man calling himself the Honourable Augustus Hope. Hope was a confidence trickster who deceived many people and broke many hearts. The Fish Hotel is at the centre of the hamlet. A path to its left leads to Buttermere Lake and the waterfall of Scale Foss, while that to the right follows a path to Crummock Water, which lies to the northwest. It is possible to walk all the way around Buttermere Lake, through pine trees and bracken. Boating and fishing permits for Buttermere and Crummock Water can be obtained from Gatesgarth Farm and Rannerdale Farm. Several lay-bys offer spectacular views across Crummock Water. Formed by the River Cocker and once joined to Buttermere, the 1.5-mile long lake is now separated from the larger lake by a 3/4-mile strip of low-lying fields. If you wished to find a quiet corner of the Lake District, where you could be all alone and without any distractions save that of the countryside, then you could hardly do better than to choose Loweswater. Linked to the world by one tiny road that goes nowhere in particular, apart from the hotel, a few farmhouses and a cottage which caters for visitors, there is only one industry in the area, farming, and that almost exclusively means sheep. The The farmer's year revolves around the annual recurrence of lambing, clipping and dipping, and the sheep auctions. The little lake itself is beautiful, particularly on a summer's evening. Heavily wooded on one shore, the sides rise steeply up from the pool, squeezing the road close to the water's edge. Cockermouth developed as a market town beneath the mainly 14th century castle. The fortress is now mostly in ruins. The town is a maze of old streets, alleyways and yards, which come to life on Mondays when the market is held. 2 rows of trees give particular distinction to Main Street. In Banks Court, the Ethnic Doll and Toy and Model Museum has imaginative displays that will delight children and adults with nostalgia. In this fine 4-square Georgian house, on April the 7th, 1770, the poet William Wordsworth was born. The following year, his sister Dorothy was born, and with their 3 brothers, they grew up in the house until 1783. The River Derwent, which runs along the bottom of the garden, was to Wordsworth the fairest of all rivers. Wordsworth House, as it's now called, belongs to the National Trust and is open to the public from Easter to October. The road rises sharply to 1,043 feet at Whinlater Pass, but the road is wide and there are several laybys. Noble Knot picnic site on the left is a starting point for many marked footpaths. At the summit, the Forestry Commission has established a visitor centre, displaying and selling a range of items about forestry and wildlife. Nature trails, marked walks, and special activities for the children are available. The area around Bassenthwaite, 6 miles north of Keswick, once had Roman and Norse settlements. Thwaite is an old Scandinavian word meaning clearing. Bassenthwaite Lake itself lies 2 miles south of the village, measures 4 miles long and is half a mile wide. It is also the most northern of the lakes and the 4th largest. The hills bordering the lake gracefully frame the shallow waters that are home to the vendace, a rare white fish found only here and in Derwent water. Lord Tennyson described Bassenthwaite as a setting in his Idylls of the King, as the lake into which Sir Bedivere hurled King Arthur's mighty sword Excalibur. Today, only the ripples on the water and the sounds of wildlife disturb the silence, especially so since the ban on motorboats was issued. I'm sure that everyone will be familiar with Old MacDonald's farm, but how many of you know about Trotter's farm? Well, let me introduce you to some of the very special animals that live here. The farm is situated just off the main A66, near Bassenthwaite Lake. On a walk around the farm, you soon become involved because so many of the animals, which obviously own the place, are wandering along with the visitors. Follow the map to make sure that you don't miss a thing and check to see when and where the next event or display will be. Phew, that was close. It nearly blew my hat off. Actually, the Cumberland Bird of Prey Centre, based here, holds special displays of falconry at regular intervals throughout the day. The magnificent birds are expertly handled by Master Falconer Gary Swainson and his colleague Gary Davis. There are several types of our feathered friends here, so I'll just talk a little quieter here because I don't want to wake him up. Inside, you can meet Monty, the python, of course, Rosie, a tarantula, and Josie, the iguana, all lovingly cared for by Peter Gould. A new attraction at the farm is Bob, a powerful 8-year-old Clydesdale Shire horse. Marion Martin will soon have him settled in and ready for the visitors this season. There are so many rare beads to see, so please allow yourself plenty time to enjoy the experience. They are open from April to October. If you wish, you can find 4-star accommodation at the Armathwaite Hall Hotel, only a few yards from the farm. Some of the nicest views of Grasmere village and its valley are best seen from the surrounding hills. The buildings of local Greystone and its little lake are set in a natural amphitheatre of woods and craggy hills, with the 2,003 feet high summit of Heron Pike dominating the view. Wordsworth's description of the location, the loveliest spot that man hath ever found. This great poet spent 14 of his most creative years in Grasmere, living at Dove Cottage, Allen Bank, and the Rectory. Dove Cottage is situated in a small lane just outside the village, by the old road to Ambleside. William and his sister Dorothy moved here in 1799. 3 years later, the poet married Mary Hutchinson. The converted barn nearby contains important documents, manuscripts, and personal possessions. St. Oswald's Church is on the banks of Rothay, was well known to Wordsworth, who described it in his epic poem, The Excursion. Every year on St. Oswald's Day, the ancient ceremony of rush-bearing proceeds its way through Grasmere to the church. In the southeast corner of the churchyard, one of the 8 yews planted by Wordsworth in 1819 stands near his and his wife's grave. In the same corner are the graves of his 3 children and sister Dorothy. The small building by the Lich Gate was the village school from 1660 until 1854. Since then it has become more famous for Sarah Nelson's gingerbread, which is baked on the premises to a traditional village recipe. Overlooked by the crag of Lochrig Fell, it is not difficult to understand why Wordsworth chose to live in the stone and slate village of Rydal, with its humpbacked bridge and beautiful setting. On May Day 1813, William, his wife, and their 3 surviving children moved to Rydal Mount. Dorothy, the poet's sister, and also his sister-in-law, Sarah Hutchinson, came with them. William, Mary, Dorothy, and Sarah Hutchinson were to remain at Rydal Mount for the rest of their lives. The day after their arrival, Dorothy wrote to a friend, "The weather is delightful and the place a paradise." At a later date, she claimed, "Rydal Mount is the nicest place in the world for children." And indeed, it proved to be a wonderful family home. Originally, Rydal Mount was a yeoman-style cottage. Some of the rooms date back to the mid-16th century. The cottage was owned by Michael Knott in the 18th century. It was he who turned a small farm cottage into a good-sized family house. However, only in 1979 has a 16th century window been discovered. This beautifully maintained house and gardens are open to the public most days throughout the year. The Wordsworths were all keen gardeners. William designed much of the 4.5 acres of garden, which has changed little since his day. At the end of the sloping terrace, he built a summer house, and beyond the summer house, the far terrace, a curving path leading out to the fell. From here you can see Rydal Water. Much of his inspiration for his poems came from walking through these gardens. But perhaps that atmosphere of homeliness that you feel is because Rydal Mount is more than a museum. It is still used as a family home today. Encircled by sheltering hills on 3 sides, Ambleside is a resort at the centre of the Lake District. It was granted a market charter in 1650. This small Victorian town, built of grey and brown stone slabs, is always busy with walkers. In the tourist season, visitors flock beneath the jutting boards of small hotels, inns, guest houses, tea shops and restaurants. The tiny, unusual doll-sized house, perched on a tiny bridge over Stockgill, was originally a summer house for Ambleside Hall. It has also been an apple store, a cobbler's and a family home. Now it is a National Trust Information Centre. Every July, the 19th century Church of St Mary observes the custom of rush bearing, when children parade through the streets carrying rushes and flowers. This tradition has been handed down from the Middle Ages, when rushes were used as carpets. Old Ambleside is focused on the marketplace on the south bank of Stockgill, whose waters powered a succession of mills. A little upstream is a splendid old mill, which is now a shop. Among many delightful fellside walks around Ambleside is one to Stockgill Fosse. The route is signposted behind the Salutation Inn at the centre of town. It is a beautiful waterfall situated in the woods. From Waterhead, Ambleside's port, regular steamer boat trips can be taken on Lake Windermere, including 1.25-hour trips along the full length of the lake to Lakeside. Smaller boats offer local trips. Surrounded by tree-clad slopes, the village of Elterwater is built of attractive grey-green stone and has at its focal point a small triangular green, overlooked by the whitewashed Britannia Inn. At the bridge end, on the old far bank, is an old cottage with a periodic carpet of moss over its slate roof. The strange little first-floor galleries in some cottages are spinning galleries, in which women used to weave and spin the local wool. Elterwater was once a centre for charcoal burning. Charcoal, made from juniper wood, is particularly suitable for making gunpowder. This became an important Lake District industry in the 18th century. The gunpowder works at Elterwater closed in the late 1920s. Today, slate quarrying is the flourishing local industry, with much of its slate being exported. Great Langdale Beck flows into Elterwater, one of the area's smallest lakes. A lovely walk through National Trust woodlands leads southwards to Skelworth Bridge, where there is an impressive waterfall. Wrynose Pass is an ancient highway. The Roman legions marched this way, and the route they established remained the only road from Kendal to Whitehaven for centuries. The 3-shire stone near the summit of Wrynose Pass represents the boundary marker of the 3 old counties of Cumberland, Westmorland and Lancashire. Nestling between Wrynose and Hardknott Pass, in the valley of Duddon, is the ancient farm of Cockley Beck and its well-known Packhorse Bridge. A feeling of loneliness and isolation surrounds the farm, with only the shrill sounds of the birds and the gurgling murmurs of the River Duddon splashing over its rocky bed to keep it company. One of the last regular routes used by the pack horses was also one of the oldest. The Romans had established a route from Ambleside to Ravenglass via Hardknott Pass, and anyone who has motored over the 2 linked passes of Hardknott and Wrynose will fully appreciate why the pack horses lasted so long on this route. Notices at the bottom of the pass do warn that the 1 in 3 pass is a single track road, unsuitable for caravans and almost for cars. requires extreme caution. So select first gear going up, be prepared for very severe gradients and hairpin bends, and hang on to your hat coming down. I have realized why it could be named Hard Knot, because it's hard not to pass it without a mishap. I suffered a puncture on the jagged rocks which jut out from the edges, so please be very careful on this road. Actually, the name is an Old Norse word meaning craggy hill. Although the road is adventurous, the views seem to make up for the effort, but choose where to park your car, and only in the specially made car parks. Almost at the summit of Hard Knot Pass is Hard Knot Castle. The castle is a vast stone fort that the Romans called Mediobogdum. This Roman fort, garrisoned by around 500 troops in the 2nd century, has remains of watchtowers, a granary, a parade ground, and there are breathtaking views into Eskdale. Despite its size, the fort is remarkably easy to miss when coming from the west, so do look out for a small car park cut into the bank on the left and about half a mile back from the summit. The fort lies just behind the car park. It was in 1875 that the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, or Lar Ratty, as it is more affectionately known, was opened. Originally, it was used to transport iron ore from the mines to the Furness Railway on the coast. Soon after, in the following year, it started to carry passengers. Since then, the railway has had a very unsettled history. The iron ore trade dwindled to nothing. The line suffered severe financial difficulties, and granite quarries were opened to provide traffic. The 3-foot gauge track was closed during 1913, but reopened the next year on an even narrower gauge of 15 inches by the famous model maker, Mr. Bassett Lowke. The tiny trains were soon carrying goods and passengers again in and out of the valleys, and the granite quarries flourished until 1953, when they eventually closed. The railway could not survive alone on the tourist trade at that time, and it was finally bought by a group of enthusiasts at an auction sale in 1960. A new company now operates the railway, supported by members of the Preservation Society. The nearly derelict line has been much improved and is now one of the foremost tourist attractions in the Lake District. The stations at Ravenglass and Eskdale offers visitors a cafe and a shop where you can buy a souvenir of your journey through the valleys on these remarkably preserved little trains. The Ravenglass Museum brings to life the history of the railway and its part in the valley life. On display are photographs and models, complemented by an audiovisual show. Wastwater is the deepest of all the lakes, plunging to 258 feet. The mountains rise almost sheer from the surface of the lake's dark waters. Slides of scree sweep down from bare rocky slopes. Sometimes the lake can be as smooth as glass. At other times, cold spray can be felt high up on the surrounding slopes. British rock climbing began at Wasdale Head in the 1880s, and the hamlet has an inn which is popular among climbers. Wasdale is also the centre for climbing Scafell Pike. At 3,206 feet, it is England's highest peak. It is a safe mountain to climb, provided the recognised routes are followed. There are many places from which to view the lake, and one of the best is from the southwest end, near Wasdale Hall. All the amenities of a modern resort are found at Grange-over-Sands. This little seaside town takes its name from the grange or granary once built here by the Augustinian monks of Cartmel Priory, which stood 1.5 miles inland. It was in the 16th and 17th century that Grange began to grow, due mainly to the thriving coastal trade in coal. But from 1857, when it was joined to the main Furness railway line, its future role as a holiday resort was assured. A mile-long promenade, bordered by rare trees and shrubs, curves around the shore of Morecambe Bay. Because Grange's position faces southeast and is sheltered from westerly winds, it makes an ideal climate for the exotic plants grown in these renowned ornamental gardens. Not far from Grange-over-Sands is Cartmel. Cartmel today is simply a large village of mainly ancient stone houses and a splendid parish church. It is a place of unspoilt charm with a character that has developed over the centuries. The Priory Church of St. Mary and St. Michael has all the grandeur and atmosphere of a cathedral. It was in 1188 that William Marshall, Baron of Cartmel, founded a priory of the Augustinian order in the village. This was dissolved by Henry VIII and most of the priory buildings destroyed, but St. Mary and St. Michael were spared. The church's towering belfry became a landmark, and the southwest corner of the priory is called Cromwell's Door. At the centre of the village is a square with tiny cobbled forecourts. The 14th century gatehouse, now owned by the National Trust, is all that remains of the priory buildings. An archway under the gatehouse leads into a street with quaint, attractive buildings, including a tiny bow-windowed cottage. On the B5278, a magnificent deer park surrounds the stately home of the Cavendish family. Holker Hall is an impressive mixture of 17th century, Georgian and Victorian architecture. Fine furniture, wood carvings, paintings and historic memorabilia mark it as a home of distinction. Wander through the marvellous award-winning 25 acres of formal and woodland gardens. One of its special attractions is the Great Garden and Countryside Festival, which takes place in June. Nearby, converted from Holker Hall's old stables, is the Lakeland Motor Museum. This museum, established in 1978, provides an opportunity to experience the nostalgia of the golden age of motoring. A replica of Sir Malcolm Campbell's Bluebird is among the fascinating exhibits of classic and vintage cars, motorcycles, tractors, and automobilia. Many different events can take place in the grounds. There is an adventure playground for the children, a baby animal farm, museum, craft shop, and a cafe. Dominating the village of Coniston is the majestic mountain Old Man of Coniston, whose summit reaches over 2,600 feet above sea level and almost 2,500 feet above Coniston Lake. Large quantities of copper ore were mined on the mountain's lower slopes, especially in the mid-19th century. Buildings in dark local stone, along with hotels and whitewashed cottages, line Coniston's main street. One of the most interesting architectural features of Coniston is the whitewashed seven-doorway terrace directly beneath the Old Man. The terrace, which is known as the Forge, is about 150 years old. Nearby, in the main street, a museum commemorates the life and work of John Ruskin, the Victorian writer and critic, who had a strong influence upon the artistic taste of his time. Down on the eastern side of Lake Coniston, Ruskin lived at Brantwood, one of the most superbly situated houses in the Lake District. Ruskin lived there from 1872 until his death in 1900. It has displays of Ruskin watercolors and drawings, a Wainwright exhibition, and other art exhibitions. Ruskin chose to be buried at Coniston and lies beneath a splendidly carved cross in the northeastern corner of the churchyard. Coniston Water has been used for several water speed record-breaking attempts. Donald Campbell, whose jet-powered Bluebird crashed at 300 miles an hour on the lake in 1967, is commemorated by an inscribed plaque on the village green. His body was never found. Some lovely woodland walks are well worth exploring here. You may wish to view the lake aboard the steam yacht Gondola. First launched on Coniston waters in 1859 and in recent years restored by the National Trust to its former Victorian splendour, this elegant craft carries passengers on lake trips throughout most of the year. Two miles northeast of Coniston is a half-mile-long, tree-lined lake that many people consider to be the prettiest of all in the Lake District, Tarn Howes. It was originally three smaller lakes, but a dam was built which joined them together. Perhaps a visit at a quieter time of the year may be more rewarding. Set halfway between Windermere and Coniston Water, Hawkshead Village received its market charter in 1608. Its pavementless streets, some of them cobbled, wander randomly here and there through narrow openings and around blind corners. Various reasons have been suggested for the houses in Hawkshead being so huddled together. Some would say that the bulging walls of whitewashed, slate-roofed houses were built in such close proximity to each other in order to reduce the impact of the wind, rain and snow. Others to keep out the marauding bands of invaders from Furness Fells or from the Scottish border. Whatever the reason might be, Hawkshead has great charm and character, with a timeless atmosphere that can soon transport the visitor into imagining themselves back into days gone by. It is easy to understand how Hawkshead inspired the young William Wordsworth to write some of his earliest poems. Wordsworth attended the grammar school here at the age of 8. Much of his time was spent at Anne Tyson's cottage until going to Cambridge in 1787. The school, which was rebuilt, still stands. Inside are the original desks, including one on which Wordsworth carved his name, as young boys do. The school is open to the public from Easter until October. The Church of St. Michael and All Angels, rectangular in shape with its massive square tower, stands on a grassy hill above the school. A church has stood on this site since 1150, but the present building dates mainly from the 16th century. A local man, Edwin Sandys, who became Archbishop of York, dedicated the chapel in the church to his parents. On the outskirts of the village is the oldest building in Hawkshead. It was the courthouse, but has now been transformed into a museum. Several buildings in Hawkshead were given over to the National Trust by Beatrix Potter, author of the famous children's books, who lived 2 miles away in the village of Near Sorry. Whitewashed cottages and green stone houses puff ribbons of grey smoke from chimney pots in the subdued brightness. Just outside the village is Hilltop Farm, home for 17 years to Beatrix Potter, and where Tom Kitten, Jemima Puddle Duck, and other characters came to life through her books. When Miss Potter died in 1943, she bequeathed the 17th century Hilltop Farm to the National Trust, together with all its artifacts and over 4,000 acres of land. Between Coniston Water and Windermere, about 9.5 miles of forest and farmland make up Grizedale Forest, which is run by the Forestry Commission. Car parks and picnic sites are numerous, and at the middle of the forest is the Visitor and Wildlife Centre, near where Grizedale Hall used to stand. The hall was demolished in 1956, but the outbuildings remain to provide a central point for the visitor centre. A number of marked trails begin here. There are various observation points in the forest where wildlife can be seen. As you make your way through the specially marked trails, look out for all the ingenious wooden sculptures. Haverthwaite Station is situated on the A590 road near Newby Bridge. Lakeside Station is at the southern end of Lake Windermere. Originally, the Furness railway line carried passengers and freight from Ulverston to Lakeside, but now the only part remaining is the 3.5-mile section from Haverthwaite through Newby Bridge to the terminus at Lakeside. Hard-working steam locomotives haul the trains on this steeply graded track, carrying passengers on a pleasant and leisurely journey through varied lake and river scenes of the Leven Valley. Passengers can choose either a return journey on the train only, or combine it with one of the lake cruises. Newby Bridge is the official end of Lake Windermere and where the waters from the lake join the River Leven on its way to the sea. Situated in an idyllic setting by the riverside is the Swan Hotel, offering refreshments and accommodation. I have enjoyed my visit around the Lake District. I hope that tomorrow you will be inspired by my reflections and you will soon find yourself in this beautiful corner of England.